Picture a surgeon. He's standing over an operating table on a warship in the middle of the Korean War, and the man in front of him has a bullet parked next to his heart. The surgeon has a scalpel in one hand, and in the other hand, he is holding a textbook. Open, finger on the page, actively reading it. That surgeon does not have a medical degree. He does not have a college degree. He never finished high school. And over the next several hours, he is going to operate on 16 wounded men, one after another. And every single one of them is going to live. I'm not telling you how he got onto that ship yet. That is somehow the second dumbest thing in this story. And there is a woman at a kitchen table with a newspaper who I am absolutely saving for later. Hold on to her. Start here. A boat comes alongside in the dark, packed with wounded men. 3 of them are dying, not hurt. Dying. The ship has exactly one doctor aboard, and it's him. He takes one look, nods, and tells the crew to prep them for surgery. Then he walks to his cabin and locks the door. That locked door is the whole story. Inside the cabin is a textbook. He flips to the chapter on chest wounds and starts speed reading like a kid who just found out the exam is in an hour, which is precisely what he is. Then he sends an orderly to shave and scrub the patients. Good medicine, sure. Also, 20 minutes he doesn't have to be in the room. And before he cuts anybody, he loads every single man with a frankly heroic amount of antibiotics. Not because the wounds demand it, but because he cannot possibly know what he's doing. And he has quietly decided that chemistry is going to have to carry him. Then he goes in. And I need to drop the jokes for a second here, because those men were real, they were badly hurt, and they were about to have their chests opened by somebody who had learned the procedure that morning. That is not a bit. That was their night. He works through it. He gets the bullet out from beside the heart. He closes. He moves to the next man, then the next. 16 operations, one after another, textbook, propped open the entire time like a recipe card. Every patient lived. 16 for 16. The man who taught himself surgery a few hours earlier went undefeated. Now, the name stitched on that uniform belonged to a real physician back in Canada. A licensed doctor with a practice and a mother and a life. The man wearing it was a high school dropout who had spent roughly 15 years collecting other people's identities the way normal people collect stamps. And the surgery isn't even his best work, because before the Navy, this guy had been a monk multiple times. Different orders, he kept joining monasteries and then leaving monasteries, apparently because monasteries are quiet and he needed applause. At one point, he helped run a religious college, as in an actual accredited-ish institution of higher learning, while himself possessing the educational credentials of a 19-year-old with a bad transcript. He also taught college psychology, under a stolen name, with a stolen doctorate, to real students who took real notes and presumably passed a real class. Somebody out there got a psychology degree partially built on lectures delivered by a man whose entire training in the human mind was watching people believe him. And that's still not the worst one. The worst one is the prison. Because at one point, this man talked his way into a job as an assistant warden at a maximum security prison in Texas, and they didn't stick him in an office doing paperwork. They handed him the hard block, the most dangerous inmates in the building. Reporting to a guy whose actual qualification was vibes. And here's the part that breaks my brain. He was reportedly good at it. Reformed the block, got results. Every single job this man faked, he was somewhere between competent and excellent, which raises a genuinely uncomfortable question about what a resume is even for. So how does a guy like that end up holding a scalpel over a dying man on a warship? He needed a doctor, not to be one, to have one. So he found a real physician, made friendly, spun a story about needing paperwork for a completely different purpose, and walked away with enough documentation to become him. Then he took that name to a naval recruiter, and a recruiter looked at a folder full of impressive-looking documents and did what recruiters do with impressive-looking documents. He was commissioned as a surgeon lieutenant. He was given a ship. He was given the medical bay, the drug cabinet, the instruments, and the sole responsibility for the health of every human being on board. He also had to remove a sailor's infected tooth at one point, which he did by looking up dental extraction and then just going for it. The tooth came out. Obviously, the tooth came out. Nothing in this story has consequences, except one thing does. And here she comes. Because after the 16 surgeries, the Navy did what any military organization does when a heroic story falls into its lap. Publicity. A press release. Wire pickup. Newspapers across Canada ran the tale of the brave ship's doctor who saved a boatload of dying men in the middle of the night. And they printed his name, his borrowed name, in large type. Which is how the mother of the actual doctor sat down with her newspaper, one ordinary morning, and read a detailed account of her son performing miracle battlefield surgery aboard a warship in the Pacific. Her son, at that moment, was in his office, in Canada, where he had been the entire time, having performed 0 battlefield surgeries. She called him. He read the article. He then had to make one of the strangest phone calls in the history of the medical profession, which is essentially, "Hello, I'd like to report that I am being impersonated, specifically by a man who is currently winning." The Navy investigated, confronted him at sea, and he did the only thing left to do. He admitted it, calmly, like a man who'd rehearsed this scene several times because he had. Here's the punchline. They didn't charge him. No trial, no prison. They quietly removed him from the service and made it go away, because prosecuting him would have required standing up in public and explaining in detail exactly how a high school dropout had been handed a commission, a medical bay, and 16 human lives on the strength of a folder. It was cheaper to be embarrassed in private. So he went home, and then he did the most predictable thing imaginable. He sold the story. Magazine feature, best-selling book, a Hollywood movie where he was played by Tony Curtis, which is objectively an upgrade. He became famous for lying, which ruined lying for him, because his face was now in every magazine in the country, and he still kept trying. He got jobs, he got recognized, he lost jobs. Repeat for years. He eventually ended up working as a hospital chaplain in California, under his own name, at a hospital that hired him fully aware of who he was. He was reportedly beloved there. He gave last rites to Steve McQueen. He died in 1982 in a bed, having gotten away with essentially all of it. And the world learned nothing, because the lesson everyone took from this was not verify your surgeons. It was, wow, what a character. Institutions kept right on trusting the folder over the human being, because checking is expensive and paperwork is comforting. And every few years, we all act surprised when it turns out a hospital, an airline, or a police department hired somebody whose only credential was confidence and a laser printer. The scariest thing about this man is not that he faked being a surgeon. It's that he was good at it. 16 for 16. Which means the actual moral here is that the gap between trained professional and guy reading fast is smaller than any of us would like it to be. And the only reason that gap feels enormous is that most people are too embarrassed to try. Please do not try. If you had fun watching an institution get completely humiliated by a man with a library card, subscribe to Sticky Storm. We do this every week, history's dumbest true stories told properly. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment. Which fake job would you have gotten away with the longest? Be honest, be realistic, be ashamed,